Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and good Shabbos from Huntington. It is an absolutely beautiful day outside. There are some clouds, but it was really sunny and not too hot and not too humid. So I'll take, 1,000 days like today. I don't like it hot. I like it cold. That's what I have to say is I like it cold. But it was a beautiful day and a nice week here. And it's Shabbat. And so let's start with welcoming Shabbat. And we'll start by welcoming Shabbat by lighting our nerot, our candles. And we have Sam right here.
Thank you. O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahalik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. All right, thank you, Sam. Let's turn to page 6, and we'll start Kabbalat Shabbat in earnest with an English reading. In the middle of page 6, let's read responsively. May the door of this synagogue be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship.
May it welcome all who cares some burden, thanks to express, hopes to nurture.
May the door of this synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity.
May its threshold be no stumbling block to young or straying feet.
May it be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness.
May the synagogue be, for all who enter, the doorway to a richer, more meaningful life.
All right, let's continue on page 20, Lecha Dodi. And as is our usual custom now, we'll sing verses 1 and 2 and 8 and 9. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabela, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabela, Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad, Ishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad u'shmo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'litila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabela, Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad, Ishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad u'shmo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'litila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabela, Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki mekor ha'bracha, Merosh mikedem nesucha, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabela, Yamin u'smol tifrotzi, V'et Adonai taritzi, Al yadish ben partzi, V'nismecha v'nagila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nekabela, Boi v'shalom ateret bala, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Let's turn the page to 22, and let's read the top paragraph of a psalm, a song for Shabbat together. It is good to praise Adonai, to sing hymns to your name, O Most High, to proclaim your steadfast love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night, with a 10-stringed harp, with voice and lyre together. You have gladdened me by your deeds, Adonai. I shout for joy at your handiwork. How great are your works, Adonai, how very subtle your designs. A brute cannot know, a fool cannot understand this. And we start in the Hebrew, in the indented line in the middle. Tzadikatam har hifrach, ke'erez balvanon, yiskeshituli, beveit Adonai, bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu. O Janun Beseva, Deshenim Bera'ananim, Yiyu Lehagid, Ki Yashar Adonai, Tzuri, Velo Avlatabo. And page 24, we'll welcome the angels, the two angels that come to spend Shabbat with us, with Shalom Aleichem, page 24. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitchem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Well, we've completed the first of our services this evening. Kabbalat Shabbat makes the first part of the Shabbat experience. We welcome Shabbat. We use Kabbalat Shabbat to distance ourselves from the work week. The rabbis, especially the mystics, felt that we needed to ease our way into Shabbat. We couldn't go from the 24-hour-a-day running around like we do, and then all of a sudden it's just Shabbat. So the mystical rabbis said we should have some psalms, we should have some songs that will ease us into Shabbat so that we're not just rushing right in. And so we've welcomed Shabbat, and now we're going to move into the Arvit service, the evening service, and we'll begin on page 145 with Chatzi Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. V'yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlik malchutei. B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Bahagala, uvizman kahariv, v'yemeru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach, le'olam u'l'olme'om haya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitbar, v'yitram, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitalev, v'yitalal, shmei nekudisha, brichu, le'ela min kol birchata, v'shirata, tushbechata, v'nechemata, damiran be'alma, v'yemeru, amen. We are on page 146, the call to formal evening worship, Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. On page 147 in the middle, let's read responsively. Adonai, your majesty is proclaimed by the marvels of earth and sky. Sun, moon, and stars testify to your power and wisdom.
Day follows day in endless succession, and the years vanish, but your sovereignty endures.
Though all things pass, let not your glory depart from us. Help us to become co-workers with you and endow our fleeting days with abiding worth. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'ma'ariv Aravim. Top of 148, Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Ahavta. Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, b'shochbeinu uvkumeinu, nasiach bechukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, uv'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed. Ki heim chayenu v'orech yameinu uvehem neged yomam v'layla v'havatecha tasir mimenu li'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Page 150 at the top. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlektecha v'derech uv'shokbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam liot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvihisharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Turn to 151 in the middle, and let's read responsibly. We worship the power that unites the universe, a promise of harmony for all.
Yet that oneness eludes our grasp, is imperfection and evil without.
Before our eyes, there is a vision of perfection, order, and goodness.
There is evil enough to break the heart, and there is good enough to exalt the soul.
When will redemption come?
We grant everyone what we claim for ourselves.
Long ago, we escaped the tyranny of Egypt. Our people saw the power of the Most High.
We learned God's presence redeems time and event, so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom.
Top of page 152, Mi Chamocha.
Mi kamocha
Ba'ilim Adonai, Mi Kamocha, Nedar Bakodesh, Norah Tehillah, Osefele, Norah Tehillah, Osefele. Yadabam bam bim bim bam, yadabam bam bim bam, yadam bam bim bim bam, yadabam bam bim bam. Ay 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 bam bim bam. Ay 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 yadabam bam bim bam. Malchutecha rahu vanecha. Bokeh Yayim L'Yidei Moshe Zeli Eli Anu B'Yamru Adonim Loch Le'olam Va'ed Bam bim bim bam Yada bam bam bim bam 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 bim bim bam Yada bam bim bam. Ay 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 ay, yada bim bim bam. Ay 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 ay, yada bim bim bam. V'ne'emar ki fad Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miad chazak mimenu baruch atah Adonai ga'al Yisrael. Top of page 153, the top two lines of Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shoreinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shoreinu l'chaim. Let's read together on page 153 near the bottom. Give us a place to rest, O God. Shelter us in the long, soft evening shadows of your truth. You are true protection and safety. In your presence we find love and acceptance. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, hapores suchat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. Page 154 at the top, Vishamru, verses from the book of Exodus, from the book of Shemot. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית העולם. We are at the central part of the evening service right now, the tefillah, also known as the Amidah, and we're going to chant 155, 156, and 157. There we go. 155, 156, 157 we'll chant together, and then we will continue silently 158 through the end on 167. But we're going to begin together on 155. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei HaKol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, U'mevi Goel L'ipnei B'neihem, Le'man Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer Moshiach U'Magin. Baruch atah Adonai, Magin Avraham, Ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye Metim atah Rav Le'Hoshia, Morid Hatol, Mechalkeh Chaim B'Chesed, Mechaye Metim B'Rachamim Rabim. Somech noflim verofei cholim, umatir asurim, umekayeh emunato lishenei afar, michamocha ba'givurot, umidom lehelach, Melech mimit u'mechayeh u'masmiach Yeshua eman atah l'chayot metim Baruch atah Adonai mechayeh hametim. Let's turn back to page 160 and let's read together in the middle of the page. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. And may all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may we all live in such a way that this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-Shabbat. And we'll continue with Ritzeh.
You don't mind?
That's the only one we have.
Ratzei, Ratzei, Ratzei Adonai Eloheinu be'amachal Yisrael u'tafil b'tam be'avatecha Utahil haratzon tami, Utahil haratzon tami, Avodat Yisrael Omecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Shaltecha lechadecha. Vayinaranav, Shaltecha lechadecha, Vayinaranav.
Let's go to page 163, and we'll read responsively at the top. For the good in us, which calls us to a better life, we give thanks.
For the strength to improve the world with our hearts and our hands, we offer praise.
For the desire in us, which leads us to work for peace, we are grateful.
For the life of nature, harmony and beauty, for the hope of tomorrow, all praise to the source of being.
Let's turn the page to 164, and we'll continue with Shalom Rav. Shalom Rav, O Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav, O Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom rahav al Yisrael amcha. Tasim le'olam. Shalom rahav al Yisrael amcha. Tasim le'olam. V'tov be'enecha levarech et amcha Yisrael. Bechol edu v'chol sha'ah Bishlomecha Shalom Rahav Al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam Shalom Rahav Al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam Tasim Leolam Tasim Leolam. Let's read responsively near the bottom of the page. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes.
Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of our world. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart.
Praise to you, Adonai, who blesses your people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamivorech et amo Yisrael, v'shalom. And let's jump to 253 for the Mishaberach, for the Cholim, for those who are ill. We're in the middle of the page, and if you have anyone who needs special healing this Shabbat, whether it's physical, spiritual, or emotional, people who are fighting the coronavirus, COVID-19, we'll keep them in our thoughts and near our hearts. The middle of page 253. Mishebeirach Avotenu Mikor habracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. V'lishebeirach imotenu mikor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We're at the top of page 258, and let's read together the prayer for our congregation and the prayer for our country, followed by the prayer for Israel. Source of all being, may the children of this community learn these passions from us: love of Torah, devotion and prayer, and support of the needy. May we guide with integrity, and may our leadership be in your service. May those who teach and nourish us be blessed with satisfaction, and may we appreciate their time and their devotion. Bless us with the fruits of wisdom and understanding, and may our efforts bring fulfillment and joy. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levacha b'yirah na'avod. Thus says Adonai, this is what I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of lawlessness, to let the oppressed go free and to break off every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry and take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, give clothing, and do not ignore your own kin. If you banish the yoke from your midst, the menacing hand, the evil speech, if you offer compassion to the hungry and satisfy the famished creature, then your light shall shine in darkness. 259 in the middle. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Go'alo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reishit Smichat Gulatenu, Hagen Aleha Biavrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha Viamitecha, Lerosheha Soreha Vioetzeha, V'takneim Be'etza Tova Milfanecha, V'natata Sholom Ba'aretz, V'simchat Olam Liyoshveha, V'nomar Amen. And in English, we'll read together. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and the fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. It's interesting to note that the first two words of this prayer for Israel, Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, you will never see translated literally. Not that there's anything wrong with the two words, but when I translate them for you, you'll understand why we don't say them literally. We always have a more poetic translation. Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, literally translated is our Father who is in heaven. And so there's another religion that uses similar words to that. And so our rabbis who translate this particular prayer have wisely taken the challenge to find creative ways of Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, two very nice Hebrew words, just difficult to translate literally in a Siddur. All right, we are at Parshat Ekev. Hard to believe we're at Ekev already. As you know, the entire book of Devarim, the entire book of Deuteronomy is Moshe's final speeches. And so this week, he continues with his speeches. And he tells Israel to maintain the covenant with God. Right? That's the most important thing, this idea of brit, this idea of covenant. And that we're to observe the mitzvot, observe the commandments that God has laid out in the Torah. And if we do so, Moshe says that Israel, Bnei Yisrael, will be fruitful and victorious against their enemies. And he reminds them that at one point in their journeys that they were subjected to hunger, and they complained, of course, but we get this very, very famous line that man does not live by bread alone, but what comes forth from the mouth of God. And so Moses reminds them, God will take care of you if you listen. Moses then talks about what happens after they settle the land. And Moses, or if you're like me, you look at the person who is writing in Moshe's voice, who's using Moshe as a speaker. The person who wrote these speeches, whether it was Moshe or another editor, had a keen insight to the human psyche. He said, because after settling the land, don't become arrogant. Don't think you were successful because you were so important or that you were so good. And he says, rather, it's not because of your virtue that you get to settle the land, but because it's a punishment for the people who are in the land because they're idolaters. So it's an interesting idea there that don't become so full of yourself. You're not getting the land because you're overly virtuous. You're getting it because the people who are there are not so virtuous. And then, of course, Moshe reminds them that God is fulfilling the promise that God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that we will get the land of Canaan. He recalls then a dark moment. He recalls their disloyalty, the golden calf, right? When Moses went up to Mount Sinai and was gone for 40 days, the children of Israel panicked and they fashioned a golden calf and started to worship it. And even though God was angry, and rightfully so, Moshe takes Israel's side after he shatters the tablets, and he convinces God, argues with God actually, not to destroy the children of Israel, not because they're righteous, not because they necessarily deserve saving at this point, but Moshe says to God, what are the Egyptians going to say? You took them out of the land, you were going to redeem them, you were going to take them to this land that you promised them, and you couldn't even get them across the desert. And so God decides not to destroy Israel, but they get punished. Moshe goes back up to the mountain and carves 2 new tablets upon which the Aseret HaDibrot are written. And then Moshe recounts the death and burial of Aharon. It's strange that he doesn't recount the death of Miriam, who was also very important in his life. He recounts the death and burial of Aaron, his brother. And then Moses gives this interesting command. He says that you're to cut away the flesh of your hearts. And in the Hebrew, it literally means that you will circumcise your hearts. Right? And a lot of commentators spend a lot of time trying to unpack what this means. And basically what it means is don't harden your heart. Be open to the Torah, be open to God's word. Don't be cynical. Don't become shut off that you don't feel. Don't be so cynical that you don't care. And then to close this week's portion, we get the second paragraph of the Shema. So last week we had the Shema and the V'ahavta. This week we have the second paragraph. And that's the book of Ekev, not the book, the Parsha Ekev, just in a couple of minutes. All right, we're continuing this week our discussion of the Aseret HaDibrot, of the 10 utterances, and we're at number 3. We're at Gimel. And it's one that gets a lot of, I won't say it's misinterpreted, but there are creative ways that people have looked at this particular statement. And in Hebrew, it's Lo tisa et shem Adonai Elohecha, you shall lashav. There we go. Right? You will not swear falsely by the name of the Lord your God. Ki lo yinakeh Adonai et asher yisa et shemo lashav. There's that word lashav again. For the Lord will not clear, often translated as forgive, one who swears falsely by God's name. All right, so that's an interesting command. It's an interesting statement. And it's been used, or it's been interpreted as don't lie under oath, right? Don't commit perjury. It's been interpreted as don't swear to something that you don't have any idea, any desire, not desire, any that you know you're not going to fulfill whatever you swear. And it's also been used by people so you just don't use God's name out of context. You don't attach God to damn it or things like that, because that's using God's name, swearing by God's name. And it really isn't. But some rabbis do come up creatively and say, just don't use God's name out of context and you'll be safe. So we have a couple of interesting words there. Lo tisa, you will not, literally means to raise up. Or to, and that could be, you will not raise up God's name. You will not use God's name in such a way. You will not utter God's name. Lashav, and that could mean falsely, right? So if you're going to make a vow, you're not going to bring in God's name. But it could also mean for nothing, right? Don't use God's name for nothing, right? If you're going to use God's name, you have to have a purpose behind it. Don't just use God's name frivolously. I like that word, frivolous. And there's an ambiguity here that allows for all these different ways of interpreting or translating this particular utterance, right? So like I said, it's a statement about perjury. When you have to swear on God's name, like when you go to if you wind up in court and you're called as a witness and they bring out a copy of the Torah or of the Tanakh for you to put your hand on and say, I do solemnly swear that I will say the whole truth and nothing but the truth, right? You're invoking God as your character witness. And so if you're going to lie, they say better not to use God's name, because that would be considered a false oath. And swearing falsely, right? This is one of my favorites, is that anytime we want to suggest that we're serious or that we are telling the truth and we want to convince somebody that we're telling the truth, we often say, I swear to God that X, Y, or Z. And if X, Y, or Z is not true, you have just taken God's name in vain. You have called God down as a character witness to witness how bad a character you are. Right? So if you ever say, I swear to God, I'll never step foot in that store again because they were out of potato chips or whatever. And then the next day you're back in that store and you say, oh no, I was just joshing. I wasn't serious about that. Then why did you invoke God's name? And so this is what this utterance is getting at, how we shouldn't be loosey-goosey when we use God's name. And basically what this command does for us, and again, it's one of those threads that we looked about at a number of weeks ago when I talked about Lashon Hara, when I talked about evil speech, we had that number of parshiot, 4 or 5 in a row, that taught us that words matter. Well, here's another place where words matter. That words create, words can hurt, words can heal, and especially if you're going to invoke God's name, make sure you're using it in the right way. And therefore, because words matter, don't just use God's name for using God's name, especially if you know you're lying. There's a modern interpretation that I came upon, and the way this person interpreted is, he didn't give a literal interpretation. He basically said, you shall not tie God's name to ungodly things. And I really like that, right? Don't bring God's name into something that is ungodly. Don't claim that God endorses your behavior if your behavior is less than holy or if your behavior is evil. And we know that this has been done. And it continues to be done, right? We know that in the 1800s and before, the Torah or the Bible by Christians and even by Jews was used to justify slavery. The Bible has been used to justify ill treatment of women. The Bible has been used to justify treating lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgendered people horribly throughout our history. All of that bad behavior, anti-immigrants, anti-this, anti-that, people will hang their hats on Bible verses and say, see, the Bible says we should hate. God's name is invoked all the time. God hates this, God hates that. But we shouldn't be linking God's name to behavior that is abhorrent. And that's what this commandment, this modern interpretation, I think really distills the essence of what the ancient writers were getting at. I think that this way of is teaching us, don't bring God's name in or hide behind God's speak to justify or excuse bad behavior. Why? Because it's wrong. And what happens when you do? God will not let you off the hook. It's right in the utterance. God will not let you off the hook if you do this. So don't use God's speak and God's name to justify bad things. Only bring God's name into things when they are worthy of invoking God's name. Feeding the hungry, taking care of the widow, welcoming the stranger, loving your neighbor. Plenty of things to link God's name to that are positive, that are uplifting, and that are helpful. Right? Words matter, and especially when you're using God's name. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and good Shabbos. Speaking of using God's name, Aleinu. One day I'm going to do a class on Aleinu. Aleinu is a great prayer. We often, most places, sing the first paragraph and then don't sing the second paragraph. And the second paragraph is much more interesting, I think. But the first paragraph has often been translated and retranslated depending on how Jews view outsiders. And there's a line that's not in most prayer books. You have to go to more traditional prayer books to find it, that says, we bow to the real God and everybody else is bowing to idols. So one of these days I'm going to do a class on Aleinu and how the first paragraph has been translated, at least in American English Sidurim, the last century or so. And you'll find it enlightening. But we are going to sing the first paragraph of Aleinu on page 282. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol la'teit gedula liotzer breishi shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam la'nachnu korim Unishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu noteh shamayim v'yoser haaretz u'moshe mekaro b'shamayim imah ushlinatu zo Begovei meromim, Hu Eloheinu Einod, Emet Malkeinu Efes Ulato, Kakatu V'Torahato, V'Yadata Hayom V'Hashemota, Elevavecha, Ki Adonai hu Elohim, Bashamayim imah, V'al haaretz, V'tachat eino. Let's read together at the top of page 285. Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. May all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. 287. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu Yeh Adonai echad u'shemo Shemo Echad. Just a day or two ago, if you follow Jewish things on Facebook or on the internet, you will have heard or seen that a man named Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz passed away. I think it was 83 in Israel recently. And if you don't know who Rabbi Steinsaltz was, who he was? Yeah, who he was. You're missing out. He was a great intellect. He was an amazing fellow. What he did is he revolutionized how we study Talmud. He grew up in a secular household. His father wanted him to have some religious education, and then Rabbi Steinsaltz became an observant Jew. He became a follower of the Lubavitcher Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. But what Rabbi Steinsaltz did is he took the Talmud and translated it, all 20 volumes, into Hebrew with a running commentary. And this revolutionized how we study Talmud. Because when you study Talmud, half your time is spent trying to figure out what they're trying to say. And what he did for us, at least those who read Hebrew, but now it's been translated into English as well, is he made it easier for us to understand the beauty of the Talmud. And he spent his entire life, his adult life, almost 60 years, working on translating our texts with a commentary and an interpretation so that they could be accessible. And he got himself into trouble. A lot of ultra-Orthodox rabbis in Israel and outside of Israel banned his work, saying, you're making it too easy. We have this way of teaching it, and now you've made that teaching irrelevant. So rather than us change, we're going to ignore your work. He thought it was fine. He says, I'm not trying to change the Orthodox world. I'm trying to make Talmud accessible to those who might not be living in the yeshiva world. And so he passed away this week, and the world is a sadder place because of that. This week, we continue to observe the Shloshim for Gilbert Weisberg. And this week, we observe the following yahrzeits: Deborah Kolker, friend, daughter of Herb and Betty Kolker, sister of Dave, Larry, and Steve. Estelle Klein, Mitch's mom. Barbara Mayer Good, Paul Mayer's older sister. Joseph Stern, Rena's father-in-law, and father of Coleman, Robert, Abe, and Walter. Jetta Rose Bro, wife of Adolf. Esther Rose Cohen, relative of Nancy Cohen Tarbis. Rose Feldman, friend or relative of Harry Fallon. Ruby Holbert, Sharon Pressman's mother. Philip Miller, B. Geringer's father. Bertha Miriam Poland, Lake Sr.'s wife and Lake Jr.'s mother. Morris Rose, Barney Kaplan, related to Ben and Saul. Harry Klein, Mitch Klein's grandfather. Albert Poland, Sydney's father. Husband to Francis, and then Eleanor. Reba Slotkin, daughter of Louis and Lillian Gaffin. Margaret Island Kaplan, Ed Island's sister. Anna Kagan, Harold's mother. Joseph R. Hamill, Dennis's father. Fran Leslie Jurin, Nathan Jurin's aunt, granddaughter of Nathan and B. Jurin. Alan Malager, father of Marilyn Poland's son-in-law. Samuel Pastor, Ethel Levine's brother-in-law. Regina's great uncle. And Isabel Spindell, Donna's mother. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May their memories be a blessing to us always, and may they all rest in peace. Mourner's Cottage, found on page 294. Yitkal v'yitkadash Shnei Haba V'alma tivrach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevorach le'olam homei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shmei d'kedusha b'richu. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone, and good Shabbos. Let's see, services tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. right back here in the chapel. I hope you'll join us. And then on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. This week we have the board meeting. Sam, yes?
Tuesday, yes.
Tuesday.
I'll send out the Zoom link.
Okay, Tuesday is the Board of Trustees meeting, and Sam will send out a Zoom link. Wednesday night is the Yiddish choir, the best little Yiddish choir anywhere. So you'll want to tune in for that. And coming down the road in a couple of weeks, we're going to have some adult education classes. We're going to do 2 on the high holidays, kind of an introduction to what the high holidays are all about, themes, motifs, and the like. I'm interested in finding out if there's interest in doing what I call the Talmud's greatest hits. The Talmud is a vast compendium of knowledge, but there are a lot of wonderful stories and lessons to be learned. And so if anybody is interested in learning Talmud, we'll have the text for you in the Hebrew/Aramaic and also in English, and we'll be discussing it, and I'll translate it and we'll discuss it. And each one that we do will be a week or maybe 2 weeks per story. And we'll do that for a number of weeks. So if you're interested in that, please shoot me an email and let me know that you're interested. And if there's enough interest, I'll start preparing it, and we'll have a little online Talmud discussion. And then other classes as after the new year hits, we'll be doing some other classes and other things via Zoom. So we're busy getting stuff all put together for you. So let us know what you're interested in. And I think that's it. That's it for this week. Let us close out with Adon Olam, because that doesn't end without that. Two of my favorite songs, Yigdal and Ein Keloheinu, are missing lines in this Siddur, and so it confuses me. But Adon Olam is complete. So page 321. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa b'chefso kol azai melech shemo nikra v'acharei kiklot hakol v'vahado yimlot nora v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yiyeh v'tifara v'hu echad v'ein sheni l'hamshilo l'hachbira v'li reshit v'li tachlit v'lo ha'oz v'ha'misra v'hu eli v'chai go'ali v'tzor chevli v'yehitzara v'hu nisi umanosli menat kosi v'yomekra v'yahado avkid ruchi v'yeti shan v'yahira v'im ruchi geviyati Adonai li v'lo yirati.
Torah.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good Shabbos. Be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.
There it is.